Evolutionary.org Hardcore 2.0, number 17. Today's going to be a fun one. Today we're going to talk about Euro Pharmacies Trenbolone and Anavar stack. This is really, really fun one. One of my favorite stacks, Mobster. And I know Mobster loves Anavar as well. But stacking these two is one of the best stacks you could possibly use, especially if you're getting quality. And that's the key on both of these. Let me tell you something. I've run Anavar a lot. I would say more than half the time, the Anavar that I run has either been fake, some other steroid, or underdosed. I have rarely had the pleasure of running legitimate Anavar. And that is because back in those days, when I was running steroids about a decade ago, you didn't have as much access to quality gear as you do today. But today we are very, very lucky because you've got Euro Pharmacies and they've got a really good, solid Anavar option for you. And when you buy their Anavar, you know you're getting real Anavar. So you don't have to stress out during cycle and wonder, why is this happening? Why is that happening? And no surprises. Same thing with their Tren, Mobster. When you buy their Tren, I love their Tren too. I know I'm getting legitimate Tren. It's not going to be overdose. It's not going to be underdose. It's not going to be dirty Tren. It's going to be legitimate Tren. So that's the key with Euro Pharmacies. So in this podcast, we're going to go over that. We're going to talk about advantages to stacking these two together, advantages, how to dose it. We're gonna show you Euro Pharmacies, their different Tren and Anavar options, because they have many. They've got different options on both. And we're gonna finish the podcast talking about tips on how you can maximize this to get the best results for you. So really, we're gonna talk about it all, Mom. So we're gonna talk about strength, we're gonna talk about cutting, we're gonna talk about recomp. These are great, great options with this stack that you can accomplish. So get into Euro Pharmacies, Mom. So I know you're a big, big fan of Euro Pharmacies. It's one of your favorite brands.
Yeah, I've used their products, Steve. This is the real deal, guys. Because we talk about approved sources and what that means, and Euro Pharmacies is definitely an approved source. I'll address that quickly, and then I'll talk about my own personal experience. So, guys, what is an approved source? First off, it means we know members that have brought this product. We know that they've tried this product and they've got great results from it. We know that we can go. We have. Of course, Euro Pharmacies has probably one of the best reps on forums. 100%. Middle of the night stuff. When you want help and advice, he's there. They have just literally updated their website and added a bunch of products. We like that. We want to see certificates of analysis and products tested, and Euro Pharmacies does that too. So these are the kind of things that makes it an approved source. Now, when Steve says, I've had the pleasure back in the day of having an Anavar product made for me, Steve, by a buddy that we were training with in the strength community. So, the real deal for sure. So I know how that stuff works. And as Steve said, especially when we're talking about Anavar again, I specifically use this product multiple times. And for the majority of those times, Steve, it's been Euro Pharmacies. So I know from my own personal experience exactly how good the products that I've had from Euro Pharmacies are. Now, of course, I haven't tried every single thing, but I can tell you that those products that I have tried, and if you guys want to contact me on the forums and ask, I will tell you, and I'll say, this is what I've had, this is what it did for me, these are the results. And why do I use certain products again and again and again? Because I know I have a guarantee of the results I'm going to get. If I want to put on 10 pounds of water, I can do this. If I want to gain extra strength on a barbell bench press, I can do that, and so on and so forth. And so when you go back to a source again and again and again, because you're going to get those almost exactly those results every single time. Like Steve says, there's certain things outside of that, whether you've got older, whether you're fatter, whether you're leaner, and so on and so forth, that will affect the results. But for me, because I'm a strength athlete, I am looking 9 times out of 10, Steve, for weight on the bar. And I know that I get that. And again, like Steve said already, I'm a big fan of Euro Pharmacies and Anavar for that particular reason. Back to you.
Yes, sir. And Euro Pharmacies, they've got a lot of information. If you go and check them out, they have as Mobster said, they have all that information on there, and they've got so many reviews out there that show actual real world experiences with their products. And again, like, get some gear and try it out. And you could definitely know that you're getting good quality. I like them. They're very solid, very professional gear. And it's quality, the quality. We always want the quality to match pharmaceutical grade. Now, obviously, Tren, you're not going to find Tren in any pharmacy anywhere in the world. Okay. Obviously, it's not made for humans anymore. It was originally Parabolin. And then once that was gone, it went underground, and it's been underground ever since. So you're going to have to buy it through a non-pharmaceutical source brand, right? So the idea is you want to get pharmaceutical quality from an underground black market brand. So that's what Euro Pharmacies aims to do. So in other words, if it was still produced by an actual pharmaceutical company that's publicly traded, that has a stock and all that good stuff, that's what Euro Pharmacies wants to bring you. So that's what they get. And it is 99% pure Tren. If that's what you're injecting, that's what you're injecting. So you got to give them credit for that. They've done a great job of doing that. And part of the reason is why, Mobster, is because the people that are making their gear, handling their gear, these are professionals. These aren't guys sitting in the middle of a trailer or a shack in the middle of nowhere in America, hiding, that's making meth in one room, steroids in the next room, coke in the next room, whatever. And that's what happens across America all the time. Do you want to buy your steroids from a guy like that? He's tatted up from head to toe. He's got nose rings. He hasn't washed his hands in weeks. You want a guy like that making your gear, or do you want professionals who've been trained in chemistry and who have an education that's making your gear? So it's just common sense. All right. So, Mobster, you want to touch on that, and then we'll move on to the next topic. We'll talk about stacking, the advantage of stacking.
Let me jump in just for a second here, Steve. Here's the thing, guys, and I've actually when I talk about certificates analysis and product testing, lab testing of products, I'll tell you what I really like, right? If I was going to be a scammer, if I was going to fake a product, every single one of those tests, every single one of those certificates of analysis would be dead on, right? So what is it? It's one of those things that kind of stands out for me. Some of their products are slightly overdosed, and some of their products are very, very slightly, and I mean tiny, like 1 milligram or 2 milligrams underdose. In other words, they have literally, in my mind, Steve, they have taken a random sample and they've taken it off to the lab to be tested, sent it in as you're supposed to. You don't take the stuff, you literally go, right, let's take a batch of batch 4, one from batch 6, and so on and so forth, and you send them off. And you put the honest to God, legitimate results. You don't cherry pick. You don't say, oh, that's a bad batch, let's send them another batch and get a better result. No. They will send it to you. And I love that kind of open honesty. There's no sort of like, hiding it or pretending it. Or as I said, cherry picking. They would literally say, it was 3 milligrams out, it was 1 milligram out. And I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's talk about the next option, as you said, Steve.
Yeah, so let's talk about the advantage of stacking 2 steroids. Why the stack? Now, when you use one steroid, all right, you can get really, really good results. Like, let's say you just ran Anavar by itself, or you ran Trenbolone by itself. You get really results. But when you stack both of them, you get synergy. One is more androgenic, very, very anabolic, very, very androgenic. That's Tren. Very, very much side effects, lots of side effects. You have Anavar, low side effects, and very, much, much less anabolic, much, much less androgenic, obviously, than Tren. But when you stack them both, you got to get nice synergy. It's like a yin and yang. All right. So I would say, when it comes to stacking, It is advantageous, but some people like to run just one steroid at a time, and they're kind of missing out on that because you're not going to get that synergy. You're not going to get that effect. It's like mixing lemon with water. Now you get lemonade, right? It tastes really good. It's very refreshing. But if you just drink water and you just squirt a lemon in your mouth, it's not as good. But by mixing them, it's good. So it's kind of the same logic here. Now, multiple steroids, we see some guys do multiple steroids. A lot of reason that people do multiple steroids, they run 3, 4, 5, 6 steroids together, is because they're lazy. And they just want to basically, it's dartboard steroid use. Just like I talk about dartboard dieting on my regular podcasts all the time. Dartboard dieters are the people that they basically just throw a dartboard with a blindfold on at the dartboard, and whatever it lands, they do. So they'll eat anything they want, and they'll stay mediocre. They'll whatever they think. Oh, I'm lean. I stay lean. I eat pizza. I eat fast food. I stay lean. But they're really tearing up their insides in the process, and they're basically preventing themselves from making gains. Dartboard steroid use is similar. You're basically jacking up your side effects in your body for not much return when you do that. So these guys that post these cycles are running 5, 6 things at a time. Unless you're a professional bodybuilder, competing for trophies and competing for followers online and all this stuff, it's really just being lazy because you're just trying to just put it's kind of like eating gumbo in New Orleans. They mix in everything in the pot, stir it, and warm it up, and then they serve it to you. Who the hell knows what's in it? Could be anything. Could be pieces of human flesh in that gumbo. Could be rats in that gumbo. We don't know. It's a surprise. Well, it's the same thing with that. So by controlling what you're doing and only running 2 at a time, you're controlling what's going on. There's more control over it. That's why I like doing 2 steroids at a time. And notice on this stack, this is another thing, Mobster, and I want you to talk about this too. We're not including testosterone. And a lot of people out there, they'll say the bro signs, that you have to run testosterone as your base. No, you don't. You don't have to run testosterone as your base. In fact, it's advantageous with this stack to not include testosterone. And then you'll see people say, but Steve, you're going to get shut down on this cycle. If you add testosterone to the cycle, you will get shut down. If you don't include testosterone in the cycle, you will get shut down. It's not going to make a difference. You get shut down one way or the other. So, that's just how our bodies work. If you're introducing the exogenous hormones, it's going to cause your body to stop producing its own testosterone. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So Mobster touched on that a little bit.
I'll tell you what, the science of stacking, right? So we've talked about what bro science is. And one of the things that I mentioned in a podcast that we did just recently, Steve, is that because there are very, very few studies done with stacked steroids, those studies that exist typically use one, and they tend to be low dose. There's only been maybe a handful that have ever done what we would call performance-enhancing drug dosages in a study. Some of the studies have come from literally questioning the athletes just to see what they did and ask them about the results that way. So you rely on their honesty. So what do we do? How do we come up with the information that we have now? Well, that's quite simple. And the analogy I used in a recent podcast was that a buddy of mine was a steroid guru back in the day. And he said, I can give you information on how to stack steroids, how to run steroids, based on the simple fact that I've worked with 10,000 customers, 10,000 athletes as an advisor, as a coach. I believe he'd worked with the Greek Olympic weightlifting team. So you do things like you give everybody the same and you look at everybody to get different results or the same results. If everybody added 10% to the bar, for example, for the clean and jerk, then you know that the dosage you give all of the athletes in that team is going to be around the same dosage, and they've all added 10%. So over time, and we're talking about 50, 60, nearly 70 years here, Steve, we know that certain drugs run really well together. We know that the vast majority, and that's who we're talking to when we do this podcast, what the vast majority would get a result from. And for example, a great stack that we've described in previous podcasts is one of my favorites, as well as this, is Sustanon and Deca. And I know the results I get on it. So why would this stack work? Well, we know because we've run, in Steve's case, both drugs. In my case, one of those drugs individually as well as together. That's just from our own personal experience. And then we can go on and do our research as we do for this podcast. And we can look at the times that these questions have come up. Just to give you an example, I think Steve described something else. Right? When you are new to the game, and if you instantly start running multiple drugs, what drug did you benefit from the most? What one did you get on really well with? What gave you the results? We've had people come onto the forums. We still get it now. I have these drugs left over from my last stack. What can I do with them? That to me is never, ever, ever the way to run. I don't run a stack based on what I've got here in my drawer, in my office, as we're recording this podcast. I base it on what my requirements are. So, for example, again, we know Tren's a great recomposition drug. We know Steve said, because he's had great results on Tren, his strength went through the roof. Steve's also talks about how some users have great results even when their diet's poor. Anavar, we talk about, we know that there are known side effects. I do very well on strength. I don't tend to gain a great deal of muscle. So for me, this is definitely, and I think Steve said it right at the beginning, a great stack to be getting lean, muscular gains and a small increase in strength. And like Steve said as well, the bro science, and this really is bro science, and we still see people say this, why no test base? Why no testosterone? For the very reason, as Steve said, it makes no logical sense whatsoever to claim that you're taking a stack and of anabolic steroids like Trenbolone, like Anavar, and your own natural production wasn't suppressed, and then you needed to run testosterone. No, it makes no sense. Because and it's just basically silly because all these steroids are based on a form of testosterone, almost without exception. And I can't think of a single one. And you, as Steve said, the moment you take a anabolic steroid, a form of testosterone from outside, and you put it into your body, you are obviously going to suppress. Even if you are still producing some, it's going to be minimal as opposed to zero. And you're still going to have the same problems when you come off cycle. So it makes no logical sense to me, but it's just one of those things that guys have picked up on. It seemed to make sense to them, and then they repeat it to the next person and the next person and the next person. That makes no sense to me. What happens over the history of the iron game and since performance enhancing drug use is part of the iron game, so 50s and 60s onwards, is that we have classic stacks. And that means, if we have 100,000 listeners, Steve, I would say that 80,000, 80% of our listeners will do well on these classic stacks. There would be a small group of freaks that would do well on anything. And there'll be about 10%, I guess, that would struggle. And you would have to literally manipulate that stuff. I will touch on the last thing, which is the competition stuff, especially, guys, if you're working with a good coach. And again, it's like that buddy of mine from back in the day. You want someone that's worked with a great many athletes who can literally look at you, can get to touch on your mood, your diet, your condition. And if the condition is everything, where you want that thin skin, you want to look vascular, you want to be the freaky look on stage. And that's literally where a person can up and down stuff, 50 milligrams here, take that in, take that out, use a short acting ester, and so on and so forth. But that person needs to know their shit, and especially you, extremely well. But most of the listeners aren't looking to compete. They're just looking to lean, muscular gains, a little bit of a strength increase. And that's why this stack is going to benefit those kind of people, Steve, which is going to be, like I said, 80% of our listeners. If you're ready to run Tren, this is the sort of stuff you want to do. And these are the kind of gains you can expect. Back to you.
Let's talk about dosing Tren, because this is a really, really important one. So with Tren, very, very powerful steroid. And literally running 50 milligrams higher is going to make a difference in your side effects. So the more you run it, the more side effects you're going to get. That's just common sense. There's, of course, other factors, though, that go into that when it comes to side effects. I mean, obviously, if you're obese and you hop on Tren, you're going to have more side effects, of course, than someone who's in good shape. So that's just how it is. So all things being equal, you don't need to run very much Tren to get results. I like 250 a week, 300 milligrams. You can get strength increases. You can cut on it. You can bulk on it. You can do whatever you want, really, on the stack. A lot of people think Tren is just a cutter. It's not. Tren is actually used in the cattle industry for a reason. It's to make the cattle bigger so that the farmer gets more money because they weigh it by pound. So when I run Tren, I put on a lot of weight really, really quick. Like within the first couple of weeks, I put on like 7-8 pounds. But it's like it makes me bigger right off the bat. But some of you out there will run it and you'll lean out like crazy. It just depends. Everybody's going to be different on how you react to it. So this stack, there's many different ways you can use it. But at the end of the day, it's very plausible that you'll run this stack, and if you do things the right way, you'll get stronger, you'll get bigger, you'll get more muscular, and you'll lean out all at the same time. So you'll get stronger and you can recomp on this stack. So it's very impressive. So really with the Trendos, keep it somewhere where you can control the side effects. That's the key. Because if you run too much and you get side effects, if you can't sleep at night, it's going to affect your recovery. So it's going to end up hurting you, right? So it's not, the idea here isn't to run it at a higher and higher dose. The idea is to keep it where you're running a sensible dose and you're getting good results. So I like anywhere from 200 to 250. I run it as high as 400. I did not see a difference between 400 and 350 except for more side effects. So that's just me. So if you're new to this, go anywhere from 200 to 400. All right. And see how you like it. You can do 250 or 300 just to do, you know, the average of that. That would be a really good dosage. And with Tren, stay flexible with it. Look, don't go on the side, go say, yeah, I'm going to run it for 10 weeks or 12 weeks. And then you're at week 7, you're like, I can't take the side effects anymore. Don't be one of those people. You should be like, well, it's week 7. I can't take the side effects anymore. I've gotten a lot of gains on it. I've cut a lot on it. I'm ready to come off. Then come off. There's no shame in coming off early and just saving it for another cycle in the future. So I've done that myself. So stay flexible with Tren. You want to aim for, you know, at least 5-6 weeks, and then take it week by week after that. You may go to 8 weeks. You may go to 10 weeks. Some guys go to 12 weeks. But I mean, the longer you run it, the more side effects are going to build up in your body. So keep that in mind. Now, Sven, on Anavar, I'll bring you in, Mobster. How do you recommend running Anavar along with Tren? What would be your dosage and how long would you run it? Would you run it with Tren the whole way, or would you kind of stop it after a certain amount of weeks?
If I was new to this cycle, which I would be, Steve, I would. I know how I would get on with Anavar, but I don't know how I would cope with Tren. So, for example, like Steve said, the ideal situation in my mind would probably be something like 300 milligrams of a medium to long acting ester on Tren, but I would actually try Tren with a shorter acting ester just to see how I get on with it initially. I can always change that, as Steve said. And I know how well I do on Anavar, and 50 milligrams is a sweet spot for me. Now, I've done the numbers on this as an example. We know that the upper limit for some people on Tren, and I would especially be talking about the experienced user, someone who knows how to cope with the side effects. And I'm thinking especially of the genetic freak, the guys that have already got thin skin and do incredibly well and are literally set up to handle side effects and steroids in particular, and seem to benefit really well. Some of those guys are going 800 to 1,000 milligrams. But in reality, the great and vast majority of our listeners, I think, will do very well on Tren around 250, 300 milligrams a week. Guys, you can always up that a little bit, and the next stack, it doesn't have to even be done within the stack. But like Steve says, you can stay flexible. The 50 milligram sweet spot on Anavar, I think, again, applies to the great and vast majority of our listeners. But we know some users have gone 80 to 100 milligrams, and that's on a daily basis. So those are options right there, Steve. Cycle length, again, because I'm inexperienced when it comes to Tren, I would probably go for a shorter cycle. And in my mind, I'd probably be looking for an 8-week stack with these two together. But as you said, if I hate Tren, if I hate the side effects, take it out, guys. Use that shorter acting ester and drop it and choose something else. If I get on with it, if I learn to cope with it, 8 weeks is probably still the sweet spot for my first time around. After that, guys, and it will come down to your experience. And again, this is what I was talking about when I said the coaching and earlier on. You could do a consult with Steve. You could say to Steve, I've run Tren multiple times. 8 weeks was no problem. But then Steve would say, yeah, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. You be flexible on this because, again, gives an example again, Steve. Some of the side effects in Tren include the night sweats. So I'd hate to run Tren at a high dosage in the middle of the summer. But if you guys have got great air conditioning, if you manage Tren incredibly well, then we're going to change our suggestions. So it comes back to what I think of the typical user. And the typical user in my mind, Steve, would be 300 milligrams a week and 50 milligrams a day of Anavar. I think that's just perfect. That, guys, you don't have to be that person. This is why we talk about being flexible. This is the way you work with a coach or do a consult, just because you might be different. You might have done multiple cycles. You might be ripped year round. You might live out in the Arctic. You don't have to live somewhere that's crazy hot, and so on and so forth. You have different aims. Not all of our listeners have the same aim. So when we make these recommendations, we're doing it on the basis of the typical Joe who wants to add muscle and get a bit stronger. But your aims might be different. And therefore, these drugs, which are tools, can be used differently at different dosages, different cycle lengths, and so on and so forth. But again, back to that foundation number, 300 milligrams Tren, 50 milligrams a day of Anavar, I think is the absolute sweet spot. And that's probably be for me a starting point for everybody that's listening. And they would come back to us with different opinions, different experiences, and different requirements. And then we would work the numbers again. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, you know, keeping it simple, it's a combination in my mind of keeping things simple, but also keeping things effective. So by stacking both, you really, really get results. Now, you know, Anavar is one of those. Also, what I like about using it with Tren is that it won't domino your side effects like other steroids will. Like example, if you use D-Bol with Tren, now with the D-Bol, you're getting a lot of estrogen effects with the D-Bol, right? So as soon as you take the D-Bol, it's converting to estrogen in your body. So we want to be aware of that. And that's just going to add the side effects of water retention. And that's going to increase your blood pressure, and that's going to cause more insomnia and all that stuff. So you're multiplying the side effects by doing D-Bol. If you're doing something like Superdrol, which is very, very toxic, now you're adding to the toxicity of the existing Tren. And now we're going to be even more. You're going to feel like shit all day. You're not going to have energy because of the toxicity. So we want to make sure, we want to be smart about this. We want to, you know, we want to use something that's not going to affect the side effects when you're using your cycle. We want to basically be able to go to the gym and work out and have energy. We want to go to the gym and not be fatigued and not be worn down and not feel like shit all day and not be pissing, you know, brown stuff all day because we're so dehydrated, and not be hot all the time, and not being, and we want to be able to get a good night's sleep at night without waking up and our bed be drenched. So Anavar is a really good stack for that reason, because it won't add to those existing side effects. So you could even run the Tren a little lower than you're thinking in your mind right now, because now you're thinking, well, how much am I going to run Tren? Well, now you can run it a little lower because you're adding in the Anavar, and you're not adding to side effects like you would if you were to add other steroids. So think about it that way. Testosterone, we talked about testosterone earlier. A lot of guys are going to say, well, I want to run testosterone with the stack. Well, again, now you're adding to side effects because the testosterone aromatizes into estrogen. I see, how many posts do we see, Mobster, on guys, they run a Tren cycle and they're like, I can't stand these side effects. And you're like, well, what are you running? And they're like, oh, I'm running 500 milligrams of testosterone with it. Well, what do you expect? Because 500 milligrams testosterone, you're getting both estrogenic side effects, androgenic side effects. You're getting all those side effects hitting your body at once. So what do you expect? Of course, you're going to have more side effects when you do that. So I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, oh, you're supposed to run chest twice the amount as the other steroid, or you're going to get Tren dick. It's like, it has nothing to do with that, dude. Like, it has nothing to do with that, you know? So you got to remember, we want to keep the cycle clean. We want to be able to do the workout. So this is why Anavar is a really good stack here. So you get the flexibility of doing whatever you want on cycle when you're running, when you're not fatiguing yourself and feeling like shit all day. So that's the key. So the Euro Pharmacies Anavar is very good quality. The Euro Pharmacies Tren is very good quality. So you're getting the cleanest gear, and just stack them, go to the gym, eat good, get a good night's sleep, and you'll fucking grow like a weed. You'll cut body fat like crazy. You'll recomp. You'll get stronger. You'll have amazing results on this. That's all you got to do. Keep it simple. Why complicate things and keep adding more things to the stack when you don't need to? That's why we're doing this. Plus, we're saving you guys money.
Oh, yeah.
You know? One of the reasons you see guys all the time, they say, run testosterone this cycle, run testosterone with that cycle, because they want to make a sale. We don't make money when you guys run off and buy steroids. You know, I'm not getting a commission, so why would I give a shit, right? But these guys, they get a commission, and testosterone, there's a huge margin on testosterone from sources. It might cost them $1 to make the vial, and they sell the vial for $50. I don't know what the margin is. I'm not a steroid dealer, but I'm just giving you an example. So of course they're going to push to run testosterone every cycle because they want to make that money, right? So, you know, that's one of the things. So just keep it simple, man. There's no reason to stack a bunch of steroids. There's no reason to stack in testosterone. Just do it this way and see what happens. See the magic of the stack and be able to enjoy the stack without interference of getting bloated or having gynecomastia or any of this other shit that can multiply on the stack. So I'll touch on that a bit.
Yeah. So sometimes, and this happens on the forums, guys, so you can check this out for yourself. You'll have a person come on and they're working with a coach. And here's a thing, and it's one of those bizarre situations, Steve, where being an old motherfucker helps. Sometimes I've been training longer than the coach has been alive. And it'll be a younger person that's asking a question, you know. My coach said this, my coach said that. Look, back in the day, as often as not, the reason why people did certain stacks was because that's the drug that was available. Those are the two drugs of choice that was in the trunk of that guy's car, the bag that he had in the gym. That's what I've got. Do you want to buy it? This is how you should run these two together. That's not the way to put together a stack or a cycle or train or have ambition or whatever else. It should be, as it is now, that you use the best products from a great supplier to do your aim. If I want strength, I run this. If I want size, I run that. That's how it should work. The dosages, I'm not going to push high dosages because I know that you're going to look, like Steve said, higher side effects for most users, most listeners, and so on. And then, like Steve said, we're not paid when we do this podcast on the pushing the higher numbers to get you to go out and buy a bigger stack with more in there and run other things. And that's what sometimes happens with coaches. Coaches are often the source. You should run these drugs. I've got lots of these drugs. I can do a deal for you. That's the reason why you should run them. And then X, Y, and Z, my buddy over there, he put 4 inches on his arm because, and so on. And sometimes that's what you're looking at. It's the reasons why. And I've asked this question. I go, hang on, you are paying someone to be a coach, and here you are on the forum. Why is that? Because as often as not, they realize that this person's asking them to run $1,000 worth of products. It's multiple drugs, and they're nowhere near freaky genetic Mr. Olympia level. They're just starting out, and they've got them on 4 drugs. And they've got them on 4 drugs because it sounds impressive. That's not how it should work. We're stuck, as I said before, with experience over multiple years and multiple users going into the tens, if not the hundreds of thousands, and giving you advice on that basis versus making up some random stuff to make us sound intelligent, to pad out this podcast, and to have you buy loads and loads of product. And sometimes that's what your mate, your buddy, the gym owner, your coach, whoever it is that's giving you this advice, whatever they're trying to sell you, that's sometimes the reason why they have you running 3 steroids and 4 steroids and 5 steroids. Why are we only talking about 2 steroids a day? It's purely and simply because we both know how these products work. We know that they're incredibly effective. And funny enough, because of this pre-show research, I've gone on and looked and found the amount of times that Tren and Anavar came up as a stack on the forums. So listeners definitely want to know this information. But like I said, if you're asking on a forum why your coach is this and why your coach is that, it's because you don't trust them. And your innate sense is telling you not to run 4 steroids or 5 steroids, or to start a steroid cycle with this and to change it with this at a certain number of weeks. Because even that's ridiculous. The idea that you've reached some specific peak, in 4 weeks, when in fact it might be 5 or 6. But they've got it set in stone that you should only do it for 4 weeks, and then 4 weeks of this thing, and I guarantee you're going to look like this at the end. But as much of that comes from the diet and the training, which we'll touch on at the finish, as it does the actual stack that you're on, guys. So we want to go with what we know works, effective dosages that work for the majority of listeners, and to run a stack, a synergistic stack, something where these two drugs work well together, that's going to give you the kind of almost guaranteed results, providing you put the work in at the kitchen table and in the gym, and when you're out doing your fasted cardio and all the other things that we're going to touch upon. You do that, and we're going to say you should see great results from this, because tens of thousands of users have had great results from this. Not my buddy Jan at Jim, not because I'm trying to flog you anything, not because we're on commission, but because tens of thousands, if not more, have had great results from a synergistic stack just like this, Steve.
Okay, so the next segment we're going to get into is Euro Pharmacies. What are their options? Now, a lot of you are looking at their website and you're like, well, I'm not sure what to pick. So let's go over to Anavar first. They've got two options with the Anavar that are just Anavar. They have mixes as well, but in this podcast, we're not going to talk about the blends they have. We're not going to talk about the mixes. We're just going to talk about the actual pure Anavar that they have. So the one option is Anavar 10 milligram per tab, and it comes in 100 in the packet. The other option that they have is the Anavar. It's called the Oxandrolex 25, and it's 25 milligrams per tab, and each packet comes in 50 pills. So it's as simple as that. So you can make the decision on which one you want to go with. Obviously, they're actually not that much different in price, because you're getting one is 25 milligrams but only 50, and the other one's 10 milligrams and 100. So it just depends. If you wanted to run the Anavar, around 50 milligrams, it would make sense just to get the 25 milligram tab and just do two a day. But if you want to do maybe 30 milligrams, then you could do get the 10 milligram and just run that 3 times a day, or take all 3 at once. That is a good question. Now, a lot of people want to know, how often should I dose Anavar? So look, if you dose it AM, PM, that's perfectly fine. You can dose it all at once. You can do it that way too. So Anavar is one of those. It's got a long enough half-life where if you just dose it once a day, it's going to be in your system for 24 hours. So remember, when it comes to half-life, you take the half-life and you multiply it by 5. And that gives you how long it's actually going to be active in your system. So don't think, well, a steroid has this much of a half-life, it's only going to be in my system that long. That's not what half-life means. So a lot of people don't understand that. So I try to explain that a lot to people on the forums and stuff. Now, in terms of the Tren, Mobster, do you want to kind of go over the different Tren options from Euro Pharmacies and explain what they are?
Let me touch upon very quickly, Steve. I would probably go for the 25s on the Anavar. And like Steve said, I'd probably go 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, just to keep my blood levels normally. My understanding very quickly on half-life is literally, if you take 100 milligrams of something, it's how long it takes to go down to 50 milligrams in your system versus the 100. And so, for example, it could be 8 hours, 16 hours, 21 days. It completely depends upon the product. But like Steve said, it's the difference between half-life and clearance. And this applies to all drugs, over-the-counter, stuff that the doctor gave you for a medical condition, whatever, guys. So it's not just steroids when we talk about half-life, it's every drug you can think of. On the Trenbolone, Steve, like you said, without even touching upon the cutting mixes and blends, which are used for different reasons, let's start with the very first one at the top of the page here, Steve. Trenbolone acetate, 100 milligrams a mil. This is actually, I think it's the shortest acting one, Steve, is it not? And this is probably what I would try my first dipping of my toe in the water when it comes to Tren. Quick in, quick out, and a relatively low dose here. Just literally for me to see how I would get on with Tren. They have other options. I will talk about another option. I'll bring Steve in again. Trenbolone enanthate. This is 200 milligrams a mil. Obviously, an enanthate is a longer acting. It's probably the medium, because I believe there's one more which is longer acting. And this will probably be very, very popular with most users, and especially those of you that have previously had experience of Tren know how to mitigate the side effects, know how you feel on it. If you're a Tren god, Tren is gold lover, then I believe Trenbolone and Anavar at 200 milligrams a mil is almost certainly going to be one of your favorites, and it's definitely something that they offer on Euro Pharmacies. What about you, Steve, for the next option?
Yeah, so the other option with Tren is going to be Tren E. And the Tren enanthate option, it's a longer ester. The Tren Ace is shorter. So with the Tren Ace, you want to inject it every other day, maybe 3 times a week. I think it's perfectly fine to do 3 times a week. A lot of people say, oh, you got to do it every day, blah, blah, blah. You don't. 3 times a week is fine. If you want to do it every day, do it every day. If you want to do it every other day, perfect. But 3 times a week is fine. Trenbolone enanthate, you only have to inject it once or twice a week, okay? It's got a long ester. The enanthate ester is like 10, 11-day half-life, okay? So it's going to be in your system. As soon as you inject it, it's going to take 50 days to be out of your system. So then dose it once or twice a week. 200 milligrams per milliliter, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. I like the Tren E. I don't like injecting very much. 1 cc is 200 milligrams. So makes it simple, but you lose the flexibility with it. It's going to take a little longer to kick in, even though it does hit you like a ton of bricks. It's going to take longer to be out of your system. So if it gets to the point where you're on week 7, you're like, I can't take the side effects anymore, I'm going to stop. It's going to take a couple weeks for the side effects to start going away on the Tren E. But on the Tren Ace, they'll start going away within a week. You see the difference? So that's what you want to kind of keep in mind. That's why what Mobster said is really, really good advice. If it's your first time with Tren and you're worried about side effects and you're expecting side effects, which you should expect side effects, then go with the Tren Ace. Now let's say you can't decide between the both. You're like, you know what? I like the Tren Ace, but I like the Tren E. I can't really decide which. Okay, then in that case, mix them together, and you can go with their Tri-Tren option. And their Tri-Tren option comes with the Tren Ace, the Tren E, and the Tren Hex, which is an intermediate ester. So you're running all 3 of the esters in the Tri-Tren. Comes on 150 milligrams per milliliter. And comes in a 10 milliliter vial. The price is pretty much the same across the board. Now, the Trenbolone acetate is going to be more expensive. Even though it's cheaper, the vial is cheaper, it's going to be more expensive because you're only getting 100 milligram per milliliter, you see? So you're going to need more of it to run the same amount as you would, because the Tren E comes in 200 milligrams and the Tri-Tren comes in 150, see? So ECC is going to be less. So that's the difference. But Tren Ace is really, really popular among professional bodybuilders because they want that flexibility. They want to be able to start and stop it. So that's why Tren E is the #1 seller among Tren. But look, at the end of the day, I've used all these. I've used the Ace, the E, the Tri-Tren. They all hit you like a ton of bricks. They all are going to help you set personal records. They're all going to help you completely transform your physique if you do everything right. And it's going to blow you away. This stack is so simple to do. And literally, like, if you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, man, I haven't run Tren yet, I really want to try it. I want to see what it's capable of. And you're ready to rock, okay? You're in good health. You're ready to rock. Go for it. I mean, just fucking go for it. I mean, you know, give it a shot. And make sure that you're doing it right. You're eating good. You're training good and everything. We're going to get into tips on all that now. Mobster, if you want to finish up.
Yeah, let me just finish up on this one,
and then start getting into some tips on diet, cardio, and training.
Yeah, so for example, guys, it's something fun. I want to touch on, or should I say, expand on something that Steve said earlier on. Right, so lots of companies, including Euro Pharmacies, produce pre-packaged products, pre-packaged blends, including, as Steve said earlier on, the Trenbolone with the 3 different versions of Tren in there. Now, one of the things you can do, guys, and sometimes just a handful of listeners, it seems to sort of zoom past them, there is zero to stop you making up the ratios yourself. So, for example, test Tren E and Tren A and just drawing up from each vial the exact same amount that you want into the syringe, change that pin and inject. Nothing to stop you doing it. Simply, companies like Euro Pharmacies have done the work for you and they produce blends, in this case, the Tri-Tren, where the ratios are at an optimal level for the majority of users again. But if you want a different level, do what I've just suggested. But they're both one, not one's alcohol based and one's oil based. That's no good at all. You want them both to be alcohol based or both oil based. And if it doesn't any steroid, never mind trend, then you can draw those up into the same syringe mill of each and inject and do exactly what you want. It just seems to some people they think they have to inject each one individually. No, that doesn't have to be the case. You can do that for yourself. On the trend mixes, and again, I'm thinking whether you were doing the version I've just said, which is kind of homemade and as such, or using a blend. One of the reasons people do that is what's called a steady blood level. And this is the reason why you have short, medium, and acting all in the same mix. And that seems to negate some of the side effects, Steve. But we've had this in listeners and on the forums where they said that because it had the short, medium, and long acting in there, you didn't get those ups and downs of hormonal levels in the body as you were using the product. And that seemed to help. You either had the side effects or you didn't, or it was a much sort of more consistent way of feeling. And again, we touched on this in a recent podcast when I said we forget just how hormonal we are and how we can be affected by our raw hormones, and how, when they're low, we feel like shit. When they're high, we feel great. So you want a consistent level. And in this case, I think that strength and those muscle gains and the kind of stack that you're running to get the gains and the results you want in the gym, a consistent level is going to have you feeling, if it works for you, pretty damn good all the time, Steve. Yeah, let's touch on the tips now. I'll jump in straight away, guys. So Tren has very well-known side effects. And if you're listening to this for the first time, listen to our specific ones and come on the forums. As a great example, quote unquote, Trensomnia. Basically, your body seems to heat up, and that's just literally your metabolism running a lot higher and faster than normal. And so for a lot of users, you get the night sweats. So something we did in a recent podcast, we said, if you have aircon, use it. Get one of them silent fans by the side of the bed. Definitely have I've got a bottle of dilute squash that I keep by the side of the bed, especially in this warm weather that we're having here in the UK right now. Ice water, if you can do it, guys, a jug or something like that by the side of the bed to keep you cool, and definitely some sort of fan or cold air blowing onto your body. What about tips on cardio from you, Steve? Because I know that you do a lot more cardio than I do, and specifically fasted cardio, and then we'll give them some diet tips as well.
Yeah, so the problem with the cardio and fasted cardio with Tren, I'm going to explain it. It's really easy to explain. So so Tren, because it is so strong in the body, it's so anabolic, so androgenic, it basically is such a potent nutrition partitioner that you're not going to be able to fast for very long on Tren. So really with Tren, you want to spread your carbs out throughout the day, and that will limit side effects. That will limit feeling hypoglycemic on it and having fatigue and having the night sweats and all that stuff. So I'm not saying go out and eat cookies and ice cream and cake. I'm saying go out and eat your good carbs. Your fruits are very good. Watermelon is very good. I have an article on Evo about watermelon that I wrote. And watermelon is very beneficial because it's full of electrolytes. It's also going to cleanse you out. It's very good for your kidneys. So that's going to really help on Tren. In summertime, especially, that's when watermelon's in season. So it works perfect. It's nature's way of giving us something that we need during the summer to stay cool. So fruits, sweet potatoes, brown rice, wild rice, quinoa, these good carbs options are really, really good on Tren. And spread them out throughout the day. So don't try to fast like half the day or the whole day on Tren. It's just not the time for this. Tren, you really have to you got to overfeed your body carbs. Carbs are your friend when it comes to Tren. So you're going to need that. Especially if you're going to go work out. It's going to be really hard to work out and do cardio or do weight training while fasting on Tren for that reason. Now, in terms of regular cardio on Tren, now Tren destroys your cardio. And the reason why, the number one reason why is because it's so inflammatory in the body. There's something called PGF2A that increases in the body. And that's a prostaglandin. And that's going to cause a lot of inflammation in all your organs, your lungs, everything. It's going to inflame your breathing pathways. It's going to make it harder to breathe. So when you're running and you're trying to move oxygen throughout your body, you're breathing in, breathing out, it's going to restrict that. So it's basically like tying something around your neck as you're trying to run. And if you've ever run Tren and then try to do cardio, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But and also it wreaks havoc on your heart health. So obviously, if you're increasing your heart rate, you're screwing up your cholesterol and all this stuff, it's going to affect your cardio as well, obviously, because now you're putting in less effort when you do cardio, but your heart rate is still pounding at the same amount. So it's actually it's really really destroys your heart's ability to pump, and really the RPMs of your running or your bicycling or your swimming gets reduced and gets slower. So you really want to limit your cardio on Tren to high intensity, short 10-15 minute max. You don't want to do anything like for 60 minutes. It's not the time on Tren to go run a half a marathon, okay? Not a good idea. With Anavar, it also destroys your cardio because of the pumps. And trying to run on Anavar, not a good idea. For me, lower back pumps. Some guys get shin pumps, some guys get calf pumps, but for me, it's the lower back pumps. I can't even do a mile on Anavar by itself because of the lower back pump. So stacking with Tren and getting the Tren pumps on top of it and everything I just told you, not a good idea with cardio. So you want to get your cardio before the cycle, because when you run the cycle, you're not going to be able to do much cardio. So just keep it short. And I think it's important to do cardio on every cycle and all the time, because you want to keep your heart strong. But you just got to limit it and be smart about it when you're on this stack, because it's not plausible to do a lot. So diet, I'm going to touch on diet. I'm going to bring in Mobster, and he could touch on whatever else he wants to cover. But with diet, look, at the bottom line, eat clean. And I touched on diet just a minute ago, but it's very, very important to eat clean, especially on Tren. If you're going to consume like restaurant food, fast food, those refined oils, the additives that they add to the food, you're just making your body more sick. You're just screwing up your gut health more. So remember how I told you Tren is inflammatory? Well, guess what inflammation does in the body to your gut? Not good. All right. So your gut's going to be a lot of pressure on Tren. So you want to eat easy to digest foods. Stay away from foods that are difficult to digest. Now, for most of you, peas, beans, everyone thinks of those as difficult to digest. But garlic, onions, these are also very, very bad on the gut, and they put a lot of pressure on the gut. So you want to avoid. I would pull up FODMAP, FODMAP. Look up high FODMAP foods and stay away from high FODMAP foods. And you need to check what's in what you're putting in your body. A lot of these condiments out there have high FODMAP. So you make a burger and then you add ketchup to it, or you add mustard to it, any type of condiment. Now you're thinking, well, the burger, it's just a plain burger. I just put salt and pepper on it. It shouldn't be a problem. Well, it is a problem because you're adding the condiment to it, and that's high FODMAP. So you're consuming that, then you're putting pressure on your gut while on Tren. You're just going to make it harder on your body. So you want to stay the fuck out of your body's way when you're on a cycle like this, especially. You want to do that already, but you want to really, really, really do it when you're on this cycle. So you make sure that you're eating foods that aren't going to upset your stomach. Let's say you fuck up and you upset your stomach. I'm going to give you one final tip before I bring in Mobster. You eat the wrong thing you shouldn't have eaten. You went out to the restaurant. They put tons of garlic in the food, which they usually do. It's not a healthy meal. You had a cheeseburger. It's full of additives. It upsets your stomach. And now you're throwing up. Now you're having diarrhea, right? You got food poisoning on top of it from the restaurant. And you're on Tren. Activated charcoal. I'm mandatorily asking all of you, when you run Tren, to always have activated charcoal on hand in case something like that happens. Because if you start losing fluids, you're going to basically make yourself extremely sick to the point where you can literally kill yourself on Tren. So keep activated charcoal on hand in case you're throwing up, in case you're getting a lot of stomach problems. This way, you will be able to recover from that and you won't end up in the hospital or really, really sick. So activated charcoal, you can buy it online. You can buy it from any health food store. Take it if you start feeling sick on Tren, and it's really going to help. It'll help control that diarrhea and that nausea that you're experiencing. So, Mobster, why don't you finish up the podcast with some tips across the board? We really want to hear your training tips too, as well.
Right, so here's a few tips. Right, number one, lots of fluids, guys, and especially so we're using Tren, and for that much Anavar included, but I think it will help actually with some of those pumps that Steve said earlier on. The number one with regards to fluids for Tren is simply because you're going to be sweating it out more. You're going to be running that engine, revving that engine a little bit higher, as I touched upon earlier on. So I want plenty of fluids in there. And something that Steve mentioned way back at the beginning and middle of the podcast, I think, was something along the lines of, for some of the guys at a higher dosage, you'll see discoloration in the pee. So again, more liquids going in, specifically water, Steve. So that's number one. Number two, some guys get away with a crappy diet when they're using Tren because the Tren effects are so goddamn good to those particular users. So they can eat the same as what they would normally eat, or even worse, Steve, and still see great results. Here's my tip. Eat better, get better results, and especially on Tren. Just because you're able to get away with it doesn't mean you couldn't have had better results if you'd have ate better, if you'd have ate cleaner, if you'd have meal prepped. You'd have had even more results. You'd have had even greater results. You'd think Tren was even better than it already was for you. So make sure that that diet is on point. Something else, guys, and this won't apply to the vast majority of our listeners, but I just saw something the other day, Steve. It wasn't on our forums, it was somewhere else. And it was someone that was sort of claiming that they want to get in shape, but they were drinking from Friday till Tuesday. And whether they were drinking to excess or they were just drinking on those particular days made no sense to me. If you want to get the absolute best results from a stack, from a cycle, from any approved source product, then you need to be doing all of the right things to get the best results. And that would mean, for example, and I think especially applies, Steve, when you're on Tren, and the possibilities of dehydration and discolored urine would be less booze, or even better, none whatsoever. For the whole time that you're running the stack. Heck, it won't kill you guys. It would probably do you a favor anyway. And again, you're looking for the out and out best results. What about training? So, for example, Steve, I'm thinking of running something very similar to this stack, a little bit more of a cutter, so to speak, later in the year. I need to be fully recovered from what I've just done. And I think I'm going to wait till the summer heat's just starting to cool off. But I'm going to be running something very, very similar to this. I won't change my training as such. I will increase the volume a little, and that's only because I'm going to want my muscles to pop a little bit more. I will certainly be keeping an eye 100%. And this is the reason why we have literal online training logs, and in my case, a pen and a piece of paper. I will keep a note on my daily cardio. I already, and I know Steve does something similar, we keep an eye on the amount of steps and activities levels that we have throughout the day. And I would deliberately, especially for my cutting stack later on, be manipulating that to go up slightly. In terms of training, now, I don't consider myself a bodybuilder, guys, but I'll give you an example. If I was doing something like this where I'm going to add muscle and I'm going to increase my strength a little bit, but I'm more of a bodybuilder, then I'm going to be making sure that I do, in my case, more abdominal work and maybe working more on the outside heads of my delts, just to make myself look broader across the shoulder and narrower and tighter in the waist. Something else Steve and I have used another podcast where we talk about practicing vacuums. These are the kind of things you do. However, I mean, the way that I would look at this specifically, Steve, in terms of tips, is I would look at the individual. This is why we encourage you to have logs on the forum, and specifically to include maybe once a month, Steve, a photograph front and back, whether that's relaxed or posed or whatever else. And then we will manipulate your training to suit your aims, but specifically to improve those particular areas. And I think that's a very individual thing. So I can generalize and say, oh, this is what you should do, guys. But in reality, if we've got 10,000 listeners, you might have 9,999 different bodies, shapes, and things that need to deal with and whatever else. The number one, I think, Steve, is going to be dropping that body fat. So the reality is the cardio. So here's a tip for cardio. If you can do it, like Steve said, especially in the run up to the cycle, to keep your cardiovascular levels high, one of the tips that you could do is to do fasted cardio earlier in the day, the better. And why is that? I'd actually tried to do it, especially at this time of year, Steve, before the sun's come up, when it's cool. So you go out there and try to get your steps in and get your running and do whatever cardio it is, you're riding a bike, on the train, or whatever you're kind of doing, just to get it done before the heat of the day and before the effects of the drugs start to make it horrible on your bodies. So there you go, guys. Be sure to check out all of the available versions of Tren and Anavar from Euro Pharmacies. Check them out. Let us know what you think. And obviously, as always, we're looking forward to your feedback and what you have to say on the podcast. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It is our view and based on experience and views on the topic, and podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment apply.